Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple area to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. "Oh God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I pay tithes on my whole income." But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
I think that all of us would agree that how Bryce Harper holds and swings the bat, or Jalen Hurts throws a football, matters. That there are particular and proper ways to hold and swing the bat, to throw the football, or swing a driving iron to be effective and ultimately really good at it. Sure, one can still hit the ball, make a good throw, or a decent drive, but not like the pros. Unless one pays attention to the proper techniques and does it a lot. I bring this up because in last week's gospel, and again this evening, we are getting some very important tips on how to pray like the pros. How to be effective and ultimately really good at it. And who doesn't want to pray better? Last week, you may remember the widow who persisted with the unjust judge to render a decision. The key lesson was the necessity of prayer and the instruction to persevere in prayer, to be persistent. This week, we receive instruction about the interior disposition that we are to have regarding prayer. The interior disposition of humility. Jesus contrasts the self-centered Pharisee and the God-centered tax collector to emphasize how this important virtue of humility before God is the main and proper disposition for all of our prayer. The prayer of the Pharisee appears to be one of thanksgiving. However, we see in fact it's really not a prayer at all. It's rather a self-inflating monologue about how great he is. The tax collector, on the other hand, makes a simple prayer of contrition. Be merciful to me, a sinner, he says. contrition, which presupposes humility. And the second piece is to notice that contrite prayer isn't a private matter. How do we know it's not a private matter? Well, we know because the tax collector is in the temple area, a very public place where people are around. Further, he beats his breast. Hardly an action that would go unnoticed. So the take-home lesson for us to be better at prayer is to humbly recognize our sinfulness, our spiritual weaknesses, our brokenness, and our need to be made whole, our need to be healed. But recognize them and seek that satisfaction of need publicly. The main way we recognize our weakness, our brokenness publicly is in going to confession. As Archbishop Chaput would say, the very act of going to confession is a very humble act in itself. So as we continue to pray every day, as we get to daily Mass when we can, as we go to confession, as we gather here on Saturday evening for Mass or Sunday morning, we are showing our persistence at prayer, especially in the many and varied prayers at the Mass itself. At the beginning, we made a prayer of contrition, and then we made a prayer of praise, right, in the Gloria. In a few moments, we'll make prayers of petition. And then after preparing the altar, we will celebrate the Eucharist, which is the supreme prayer of thanksgiving. And in all these kinds of prayer, in all our efforts to hone our habits of praying, in order to pray like the pros, remember the importance of cultivating and of nurturing an inner disposition of humility before God. The disposition that is so necessary to our prayer, and a virtue I think we can all use more of.